I'm Dane Rose, and thank you for joining me in week 20 of this year of growth and well-being. How to sort through truths, or sorting through truth. And this builds on on last week's exploration of heroes, of mentors, of heroines, looking for leadership and guidance, asking for help. One of the things that can be puzzling, for example, one of my most rewarding experiences was reading through more than 200 different iconic business leaders and mentors. Tim Ferriss, in one of his latest books, I think Tools for Titans or something like that, interviews lots of different people. And what you discover is there's a lot of different ways to skin a cat. And so if we're going to go out there and find a hero, a mentor, someone that can teach us something, we've got to be able to sort through what's true. Do we want to, for example, Henry Ford Sr., the founder of the Ford Motor Company, was one of my mentors in a specific area. Napoleon Hill in Think and Grow Rich, one of my mentors in a specific area. Andrew Carnegie, one of my mentors in effective public speaking. But if we embrace the value, if we embrace the idea, a powerful idea, that it's more efficient to learn from someone who's been there and done there and made something a specialty than it is to reinvent the wheel. We've also got to sift through what to do with this chaotic data. The fact that this person says you got to get up before 6 a.m. and this person says, no, I do my best work at 2 a.m. and just need to rest. And this person does it in spurts, and this person swears by teamwork, and this person gets much more done alone. And it's like it's a dizzying array of truth. It reminds me actually of my challenge when I started my company at 17. I wanted to do sustainable landscaping. Well, the natural place to start is with maintenance. You can observe things, learn a lot by doing maintenance in small projects. Then I started doing installation when someone knew what they needed to be done. But the peak of any discipline is the design element. So in landscaping, this is landscape design. This is anything outside the foundation footprint of the house, and can include outbuildings, garage structures, driveways, retaining walls, swimming pools, waterfalls, lighting, shade, you name it. If it's outside the footprint of the house, see, this is the problem I had. Clients would come to me and say, Dane, you're the designer. What should I do? And I'd think around in my head and I'd say, there's 5,000 plants. There's thousands of different materials. I could put a wall here, or I could put a wall here. And it's like, sure, I can come up with something, but how do I know if that's the best way to do something? Is it just whatever, if the client likes it, that's fine? Is that the only guideline? I just run through ideas. Well, you could stick a garage here. I don't want one. Do you want a garage? No. Okay, we won't stick a garage anywhere. How about parking? You want parking? Well, maybe this, maybe that. well, which is it? Maybe this or maybe that. I realized that I didn't know how. I didn't have a clear and lucid equation that would guide me any more intelligently. Like, frankly, the client lives there and knows what they like. So if I don't have anything extra to bring to the equation, bring to the table, the client ought to be designing their garden. Where do you want to park? What do you want to do? And often the client would say, I don't know. So we had to develop a technology. And eventually, I talked with several architects. I read a book called A Pattern Language, which is actually a guide for some of the more effective architects. Of all the architects, some didn't know either. Some couldn't put it into words. I talked with different landscape designers. They couldn't put into words. They could do flowery drawings. And I said, well, why did you do the circle like this rather than there? Why 5 hostas right here and only 3 daisies here? What's driving this? They said, it looks nice. I said, to who? What if the client doesn't like daisies? It still looks nice. I couldn't get anything solid. So I realized this was a big challenge because I wasn't willing to go through, the design career just telling people off the top of the head, this should be done, and just saying that's the professional thing to do, or that didn't make any sense. So what I did was, number one, I created a questionnaire. How many cars do you want to have parked? How many hours do you want to spend a week maintaining this garden when it's done? What's the most important thing about the garden to you? What style do you want it to have? Do you want it to contrast with the house? Or do you want it to integrate and look like the house and garden were designed at the same time? Well, if someone bought the house because it was near the school they liked, it was a good price, but they hate the design of the house, that's a different equation than if someone bought the house for the style and they want it to seamlessly integrate. So, of course, the client has a huge role to play. How much money do you want to spend? Huge. I mean, what is the point of designing a $2 million landscape? A client says, love it. Do it. And I say, okay, it's going to cost $2 million. And they say, well, I've got $25,000 this year, $5,000 next year, and $5,000 the year after that. And it's like, we can't even build the garage for that. They're like, oh, well, looks nice anyway, bye. Or they're like, well, oh gosh. And it's like, do I want to be a designer of useless designs that are never going to be built? Because they have nothing to do with the client's actual budget and ability to pay for it. Well, the client doesn't usually come to you and say, what can you do for $25,000 this year, $5,000 next year, and 5 years? They say, what should I do? And you have to throw it right back at them. Well, how much money do you have to do it? Because you shouldn't do something you cannot do. That's not a very logical equation. So I gave them a questionnaire. My next challenge was then I need to help the client come into alignment with themselves. So they say they want to spend $5,000, and they tell me they want $25,000 of items. That client is in an argument with themselves, and they don't know it. So I need to educate themselves. Well, this thing that you want to do costs $3,000. This thing that you want to do costs $1,800. This thing that you want to do costs $18,000. This thing you want to do costs $200. Da 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 da. As you can see, $25,000. You want to spend $5,000. There is a problem with what you want. You want to spend this, and you want this. How are you, the client, going to resolve that? Do you want to up your budget or cut things out or do things in stages and do a $25,000 design where you spend $5,000 this year, $5,000, when you have the next $5,000, etc.? What would you like to do? Well, that's a different thing. So the first thing, of course, I have to understand is what is the decision that only the client can decide? Only the client can decide what they're willing to spend. I can tell them what other people in the neighborhood have spent. I can tell them the average landscape cost in the district. I can tell them, if they show me a photograph, because that's one of the things I do, show me photographs of 10 out of 10 images for you. That if you could have anything, this is what you do. And I can look at that image and I can say, this is a $75,000 image that's part of a $200,000 project. So this, as you can see, it's about 300 square feet of area. And it's got this big stone wall, this waterfall, this, that, and the other. So to create just this little bit inside the image, $75,000. But if we get the sense of what's probably happening outside of the image at the scale of your landscape, to do this kind of look with this kind of finishes, it's about $200,000. Oh, I don't want to spend that. Well, isn't it good to know in the first 10 minutes of a design rather than after spending $5,000 or $10,000 drawing things out? Isn't that a good thing to know now? So let's pick at another image. Let's find another image you like. Let's look at, for example, if the thing that the client likes most about that $75,000 image is a single purple iris against a black background, I've got good news for that client. That iris costs $10. We can create black backgrounds in a wide variety of things, many of which do not cost, $20,000 for a careful hand-built stone retaining wall. We can do that with a black sheet. We can paint one of your walls black and put irises there. $200. How about that? So you've got to distill the essence. And the same problem is, and so what we're looking for is truth. And then you realize there are principles. There are design principles that are always present. Form follows function. If you want to play badminton in your yard, and that's a priority, you need a flat area big enough to play badminton. That is a given. So the form of the garden has to follow how it will be used. That's a principle. It's not just a random, I think it looks nice. Then you have relationship building. In a typical garden, the front of the garden should have a relationship with the back of the garden, should have a relationship with the neighbor's garden, and a relationship with the neighbor's garden over here. And unless the client hates the style of the house and just doesn't have the money to remodel it, it should have a relationship with the house. The landscape should relate to the client and to itself and to the surroundings. Now, how much of a relationship depends in part on the client, but it certainly requires a good designer to educate the client, because if a client says, oh, I hate my neighbor's landscapes, the relationship to the neighbor's landscapes will be weaker than if they say, I love my neighbor's landscapes. In fact, the thing that would make me look be the happiest would be if all three of our front yards just seamlessly blended together, and the daisies that they've planted at the edge of their line will just continue over on my line, and the lawn, we can walk all between, we're friends. And what we're really doing is creating an integrated, functional landscape and presentation that makes all of our three houses look nicer. That's what I want. Well, we have to then include the neighbors. Is that what you want? How would you feel? Do we mind if we tie in here? Do we want a gate between here? Do we want the gate to be obvious? Etc., etc. So, but you want relationship. Another thing in landscape design is you want a balance between boredom and chaos. Hey, I want to do this here. Hey, I want to do this here. Hey, I want to do this here. This is the typical homeowner mistake. They have, X idea here, zero idea over here, Y idea over here, T idea over here. And after they're done with these little micro inspirations, they have what's called a hodgepodge. You arrive and you have no idea what's going on. It looks like exactly what happened. They had one idea on a Wednesday, then another idea on January, Tuesday, then another idea next year, and they have nothing to do with each other. It's just a bunch of individual blobs. And if you're myopic, if you will just zoom in on one little item and ignore everything else, it looks nice. And then if you'll just zoom in on this, it looks nice. And zoom in on this, it looks nice. And here, but the whole thing looks chaotic. It looks dizzyingly upsetting. Or just poorly designed. On the other hand, you have the institutional buildings, right? The hospitals or whatever, which have a square of all 200 items being exactly the same in perfect rows, and then there's a little sidewalk, and then there's another square, and all 200 items of the exact same thing are all in a row. And you can say, yes, this is an institution. This is a boring, mediocre, mind-numbing experience, from the garden to the architecture to walking inside and actually trying to get anything done. Yes, this has been professionally and institutionally designed to be absolutely boring. That's the other extreme. It's not a hodgepodge. You got to give them that. There's been forethought in how boring it is. Now, then you get your principle. It's the midpoint, a balance between boredom and chaos. And how far on that balance? See here, then you get into context. You get into context, because if the client has paid $2 million for a view of the ocean, and then right in front of that $2 million view, they put a giant waterfall and fountain. They put a gold-plated sculpture. They put a red maple to contrast with the gold, then yellow underneath the purple for maximum contrast. Then they have wind chimes moving around. Do you think someone's going to notice a $2 million view behind that amount of distraction? Of course not. It may be beautifully designed, but you don't put $50,000 worth of distractions right in front of a $2 million view if you bought the house for the view. You put all those distractions as a foreground to an ugly neighbor's roof. Because if you've got an ugly neighbor's roof and you spend $50,000 to do lots of interesting dynamic distractions, it will hold your attention in the foreground. And in the background, you will not notice the ugly neighbor's roof because so much is going on in the foreground. Typical conjurer's diversion. You want to divert the attention where you want it to go. Now, the eye always pays attention to foreground more than background. Therefore, the only way to get the eye to focus on the $2 million view is to make a boring foreground. What's a boring foreground? It should have consistent muted materials that are not as colorful as what is always a muted view. If you're looking 2 miles away to the ocean, and then you're seeing the city, skyline across the ocean and all that, the amount of air in between that mutes all the colors. These are not popping reds and stuff. So you want to make muted colors, such as a lawn. So if you do, for example, a lawn that goes right up against to maybe a single low hedge, with a slightly different green, and now you've got a crisp frame over which you see the view. Well, this is an exciting view. This is an exciting view. So you're now you're sublimating the foreground for an exceptional background, which makes sense if you're going to pay $2 million for that view. Now, if you don't care about the view, if you bought the place in some weird, troubled, refurbished, situation, you don't even like viewing the water, and you didn't pay anything extra for the view, this is, of course, a moot point. Well, who knows that? Not the designer. The client knows that. Did you buy this house for the view? It looks like you've got a nice view. Oh, absolutely. We love the view. That's why we bought the house. Okay. Now it's the designer's job to do something boring enough in the foreground that it does not destroy the view, and to educate the client about attention. Attention goes to the foreground. Once it has understood, once the brain has understood every anomaly in the foreground, it then proceeds to the background. You do something too busy, it never gets to the background. You do something moving and busy, it never enjoys the view. So you learn then it's about context. And all of this leads into how do we sort through truths. For example, my mentor, Henry Ford, I think he had a 6th grade education. And the newspapers in his day, Henry Ford had a difficult time, by the way, being mocked right and left. This will tell you something about minorities, meaning in the history of humankind, there has never been an instance in which the majority has been correct. You can go back a few talks to look at the equation of that. You can look at an interesting TED Talk to look at the reason for that. But that is a statement of truth. Now, you've got to figure out whether or not you agree with me. See, that's what we're trying to sort out, is what is an algorithm that can help you and I make sense of all of these conflicting statements, each of which might be true in one context but not in another. What do you do with a statement like that in the history of humankind, the majority has never been correct? Do you say, sure, he seems like a smart guy, let's see, the majority has beds, so I'm not going to lay on a bed anymore. Well, what's the result of that? You just wake up the next day with sore bones? So that doesn't seem to make much sense. But then a number of smart people throughout history have made a comment along those lines. What did they mean? Did they sleep in beds? So how do we sort out useful truth from unuseful truth? That's what we're figuring out in this talk. So I'll come back to Henry Ford and how he helped me. But let's look at some of the things here, because another interesting statement, all beliefs are true, so pick the ones that work. It's another truth. And then it becomes works for what? Well, works for you. Well, who's you? It's a conundrum. So the first thing is it helpful? So you make a statement, you're a liar, or I hate wheat, I like gold, whatever it is, you make a statement. Is it helpful, is the question. In other words, I like gold, you like gold. What does that have to do with anything? What does that have to do with this conversation? Do you have any gold you're going to be giving me? I don't have any gold to give you. So so that's where it comes in. Is it helpful? Because there's a lot of true things. 869 minus 372 times 8 million equals, it's a fact. Is it helpful? Not right now. So, is it helpful for what? What you are focusing on. A goal. So, for example, I shared a bunch of landscape design things. Is it helpful? It was for me, because one of the things that I do is knowing another truth. Did you know that from any point in a holographic image, a holographic engineer can reconstruct the entire hologram? So in other words, you've got a hologram right here, and you snap it into a bunch of pieces, and a holographic engineer gets a hold of this little piece right here. You probably know holographic photography and all that kind of stuff. It's light patterns hitting a material that then captures the light pattern and freezes it, kind of develops the light pattern. Now, in a holographic image, you can extrapolate the rest of the hologram from a given piece. Now, this ties in with that truth of microcosm mirrors the macrocosm, suggesting that there is an element of reality that is holographic. That there's, if we have the right eyes to look at, that we can take a lump of soil and the right scientist could analyze it, look at the oxygen content, look at, the slight bit of decayed fossil in that little square foot of soil. Obviously, the bigger the sample, the more helpful it is. Can look at the oxygen content, can look at the temperature range, can tell the maximum temperature that soil has experienced, the minimum soil, can tell what types of things would be likely to grow in that type of soil. And looking at nothing more than that, a good scientist will be able to say, well, there's a good chance there's going to be trees like this. There's a good chance there's going to be grasses like this. There's a good chance. And they're not going to be 100% accurate. They're not going to be able to do a drawing, of the exact, trees, etc. But you can tell a lot. And then you can say, well, if there is going to be vegetation like that, there's probably going to be an animal population of around this. And then given this type of thing, it's kind of probably going to be like this and like this. And in other words, there is definitely life here. And so that's what you could tell about maybe planet Earth from a single cubic foot of topsoil with a bit of air. If you just cut that out, give it to a bunch of scientists, say this is from another planet, what can you tell about it? And there's a lot that you can learn from a tiny bit. Now, from that sense, the landscape, that is something that I do. I take an area that I'm very competent, and then my working analogy is, for example, I'm a competent landscape designer. Many of the same principles, maybe 80% of what I do as a landscape designer will work in interior decoration, because we're dealing with the same stuff. And so what I'm actually doing is I'm exporting it to give some context of something I'm less competent in. I do philosophy way less than I do landscape design. And so, but I'm trying to make this useful. So I'm borrowing something that I do very well to see what I can learn about it. Because we're looking in landscape design, we're looking at which ideas are useful. And here we're looking at what truths are useful. So extrapolation is a good reference point. If you are specialized and knowledgeable in a given field, that by inference can be somewhat exported over to another field. Turn it into your language. Turn stuff into your language that you're competent in and see if it holds up. Because what we're basically doing with truth is we're designing a telescope or a lens. Could be a giving perspective on something, making it smaller, making it bigger. And what we're trying to do is develop the eyes. And you'll have to tell me if I've lost you in all this, because one of the greatest challenges, for example, that a biologist or a viral specialist, a lab technician who's trying to say, do you have herpes? Do you not have herpes? By little patterns in the blood and this and that and the other, and comparing them. And what they deal is in probability fields. And what they want to do is they want to get all the noise out. What's the noise? The noise is how nice the person smiled. Did they come from a good high school? I mean, this is instinct. This is science. So, hey, I'm from Harvard, how you doing, da-da-da-da-da. You try and ask the socialized eyes, does this seem like someone who has herpes? No, how could they have herpes? They come from a good family, blah, 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 blah. That's noise. The lab technician wants to tune everything out except the one thing that most indicates that particular pattern in that particular area. So they're looking at a microscope at a pattern within a very tiny part of the body. And what they're trying to see is that, herpes generally shows up as this, 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 this. This is a lens designed to specifically bring this into high magnification. And if they see a pattern of dots that is like this, you see the curve is slightly different, and you back that up with a little bit of data. They're concerned enough about STDs, presumably because they had sex recently in a way that's not entirely accountable for. Maybe a condom broke with someone they didn't know very well, whatever. But this is a pretty good pattern. We're not looking at a pattern like this where you just have two dots. This is the herpes pattern and this is two dots, and we're looking through a lens that can see them. We're seeing this. So part of what we're doing is learning how to frame a lens to see something very specific, useful to you. And then what do you do with it? That's partly, is it helpful? Is it helpful? I'll be back in a few minutes. Okay, now stepping back for a few moments, why are we doing all these different focusing things? Well, one of the reasons is that our conscious brain has very limited focusing pattern. I mean, just think of how, if I show you a 10-digit number and just tell you to remember that, this is a hard thing to do for many people. It's a hard thing for me. So, I write, when I get a new cell phone number, I write it down because it takes a good long while for me to remember, just a simple number. And what we're doing, see what truth is. Truth is basically a statement that reveals a pattern. And then you've got to decide, does it reveal a pattern? And then, is it a useful pattern? And you've got to do this pretty quickly because you see patterns all the time. Every time someone makes a statement, the Zimbabwean Minister for Foreign Affairs stepped down today because of allegations of corruption. Like, what does that mean to you? Like, anything? Is it useful? What do you hear? Do you hear he's a criminal? What does corruption mean to you? You know, what does that mean? Does this mean Africa's going downhill and you already knew it? And what does it mean? How does it fit into your pattern of the world? Is it at all relevant to anything that's useful? And I'm going to suggest that as we enter the information age, and I say enter it, we're just in it a few decades. Is it helpful is one of the single most important questions to ask. And since every bit of information is helpful for someone, somewhere, in some context, the question is not, is it helpful for someone, somewhere, in some context? The question is it helpful for you right now, in this context? And then, since there are lots of things that could be helpful, the question is it more helpful than any other truth or statement that could be made that relates to you in this moment? Is it? So, one of the things we talked about was goals. Something you're focusing on, a goal. So your goal, let's say your number one goal, is to increase your relationship with your partner. You want to make him or her happy. You want to grow your love together. It's a great goal, by the way. Statistics, look at Sonia Lyubomirsky's work on happiness in the pathetic absence of good data on this kind of things. A few little sprouts here and there. Look at what she's done, and you learn that as long as you're not in financial crisis, meaning generally in the United States that's having less than $70,000 a year in income per person, that kind of thing, you're probably going to do very well if you pursue that goal. So, is the truth helpful? All women are idiots. Is that a helpful truth for your goal to increase the relationship with your wife? Well, how would it allow you to do that? Now, if the goal was more, if the statement was more specific, if it said, feminine women tend to have a more diffuse awareness that picks up empathic and emotional currents in a situation, while simultaneously not picking up on other very specific bits of information. And so you're dealing with a human being who's very good at picking up relational patterns in the environment. In other words, being attuned to the emotional dimension of our human existence, which is a whole third of the existence. And men, particularly Western acculturated men, are more good at picking up on certain strategic patterns and certain power patterns and certain sociopathic patterns in very focused areas, and they're better at fixating. Diffuse awareness, focused awareness. So if you know that, is that helpful? The judgment obviously isn't helpful. The vagueness, women don't know anything, obviously not very helpful. But it depends. If you're feeling at your wit's end and you feel like you're all alone and you've been trying to communicate something to your partner and you clearly don't have the tools to do it, you haven't been taught in an emotionally illiterate culture how to bridge the gap between you and your partner in this area. No. When's the last high school class you saw on good marital communication? You haven't been taught. It's as difficult as trying to get Google to search for something when you haven't learned what letters are. you can't just look at a keyboard without education and say, gee, this, R just looks like the thing to begin a word called room. I mean, it's just a weird symbol. So we've got to become literate in the terrain. Is it helpful for the goal? Well, understanding that women have more diffuse awareness when they are more feminine. So we're not talking about Margaret Thatcher or perhaps Hillary Clinton here. We're talking perhaps about a woman who's emphasized her feminine traits, a singer. Someone who's attuned to the rhythm of the room, the music, her own feelings. So this one person is going to be aware of the diffuse awareness in the group. And they may not be targeted in on this specific thing here and there. What exactly is so-and-so doing at the water cooler that they didn't put in the full nickel in the donation box before taking a coffee. No, they may not be noticing that, but they're noticing the vibe. Well, if you want to communicate someone, you've got to show up with someone, you've got to show up on their radar. Meaning if they're tuned into the vibe, and you're tuned into dollars and cents changing hands, does dollars and cents ever interact with the vibe? Well, if you say, hey, so-and-so didn't put enough nickel in the donation, and the whole vibe of the room goes down, well, then you do show up in the lens that is the vibe. You show up as a negative instrument. Well, you can't partner with someone when you are the enemy in their lens. So, is that a useful truth to know what someone's lens is? Yes, it's useful if you know how to use it. So, the first thing, is it helpful to a goal, to meeting a need? Is it helpful in helping me be who I want to be? We, in the goal arena, we have acquiring things, doing things, having experiences, being things, or being in a state. So, depending on how masculine or feminine you are in, depending on how masculine or feminine your goal is, it's much more feminine, male or female, doesn't matter, to be interested in the state of being than it is to get that thing or get this done. More masculine, so where is the goal? And of course, it takes different skills. It takes different tools to become someone than it does to get something done. Now they link because you have to be someone with the knowledge, with the presence, etc., to get this done, or this done, or this done. And you may have to become someone who can connect empathically with other people before you can get X goal done. This other goal here, you don't have to become anything. You just have to work really hard doing this and let nothing distract you. So it's context-based. Is it beautiful? So, by the way, just before we go on to helpful, I don't watch the news. And I mentioned that in an earlier thing in media management. I don't watch the news. It's a sinful analysis. It's not that what's going on in the news isn't true. Sure it is. 3 people in Zimbabwe died on a bus accident. Is that going to change my life? Is it going to help me be a better partner? I don't think so. Is it going to help those people? Not unless I fly over to Zimbabwe and help those families, but when have I ever done that? Is it helpful? George Bush has been caught watching, underage porn. Oh, it's like, what does that mean for the fact that I want to raise $2,000 for my nonprofit this month? Did I could blackmail him? What's it mean? So, is it helpful? No, it's not. The news has never been helpful for any goal of who I wanted to be, what I wanted to do, what I wanted to buy. Oh, sure, you could say you heard that there was a sale on. Okay. So it helped you buy something. And I did watch the news when I was much younger and interested in buying things. It's just not a big deal for me anymore. Is it unhelpful? Meaning, if I'm trying to focus my mind on what I think is the most potent life to live, is the news unhelpful? Absolutely. Because what do I do when I watch the news? Oh my God, why did that happen? Why didn't they support that? Why can't they agree to something this obvious? I mean, goodness gracious, looking from the big picture, looking in, this is clearly in people's interest. Sure, it's political suicide for this, and this person, but does the entire nation need to be dragged down so that 5 people don't lose their career? I mean, give me a break. Give those people a free pension and save the country. If 5 people's career is the only thing standing in way of an intelligent vote, let's have a slush fund that just buys people off so that they don't have to ruin the country to get $200,000 in pension money. I mean, this is pathetic. You know, $8 trillion over the next 50 years will go this way rather than this way, where it ought to be going, because 5 people had a little $2,000 bribe for this and bought their girlfriend and blackmailed them this. I mean, what a joke. What a joke that we're swung by these little things. That's what I think when I listen to the news. Well, is it helpful? Not to my goals of being enjoyable with my girlfriend. No, it's not helpful. Because I'm irritable with my girlfriend after watching the news. Or I'm more sociopathic. Let's see, I'll just tune it out. Just tune it out. Let me hear a whole bunch of horrible news and then have it have no effect and just smile and laugh as if nothing's happening. So what am I training myself to be? I'm training myself to see horrible suffering and feel absolutely nothing. Is that helping me be the person I want to be? No. I want to be empathic. When my girlfriend's suffering, I want to respond immediately, not say that's someone else's problem. Well, what habits am I learning when I keep watching horrible problems? And then finally, is it most helpful? Let's say I don't have a bad thing. There's nothing wrong with being informed. That's a goal. I want to be informed. But why? Why do you want to be informed about that? Because there's a lot to be informed about. And frankly, most news algorithms are based on adrenaline addiction. Advertisers will pay more for the spot right after intense pain. Because if you show 3 people burning alive and then pause for commercial break and say, Dove soap, the calming, soothing soap that helps your skin. See, what you've just done is you've pumped up the cortisol, you've pumped up the adrenaline, then you're bringing it down. And you're connecting the down, the rescue, with a brand. And brands know that. So they will pay a lot if a news person will make that story more graphic, more adrenaline cortisol producing. So the TV company wants to make money. No one's burning alive in the United States today. Oh darn. We don't want to lose an extra 50 grand on this spot. Hey, someone get me Zimbabwe, get me this. We need burning bodies now. Or Dove Soap, who we're in service to, will not be satisfied, will not choose our network for the spot. Is that helpful? To be more attached to Dove Soap? Of course it's not. But even if it is useful, studying burning bodies around the world, and the news will give them to you. So, is it more helpful? Because here's this truth. You should be informed. It's a statement. It's a truth. You should be informed. So, what is it? What values does it relate to? Empowerment, not having anyone catch me unawares? What's driving it? You should be informed. See, there's a lot of other statements, and what we don't realize, if we don't think about it, is that there is finite amounts of time. And for me to be talking with you, I'm not going to dinner right now. I'm not petting my dog. I'm not complimenting my girlfriend. I'm talking to you. And the question is it most helpful? Meaning, for my goals, is my life going to improve more doing this or going and giving my girlfriend a hug? It's about context. And it's relative. And what I worked out as just one example was I like writing books. This is a different version of that, but I like writing books. So I worked out it takes me an average of 40 minutes to write a chapter. 100 chapters, a book. So in 100 days of news watching, I can write a book. That's an extra 1 to 3 books a year, editing and all that. So the question is, will I be further along having written another 1 to 3 books on things that I'm interested in, which means that I've learned them, watched the last, couple of tapes teaching what you learned, that I've taken them in? Or will my life be in a better place because I have the up-to-date current tally of exactly who's doing something horrible where? Because that's what we call the news. I want to know exactly what horrible things are going on where, not so that I can do anything about them, but so I can get my righteous fix, so I can get my adrenaline fix, so that I can get my witty comeback fix, so that I can not be caught unaware and let someone have a superior look. That's why I want it. So, okay, they're not terribly dynamic goals. Is it beautiful? And I think this is a really important thing. Plato, beauty, truth, and goodness as a founding kind of triad of evolution values. Beauty, truth, and goodness. Is it beautiful? Because there are a lot of different ways of seeing and saying things. And some are more beautiful than others. Is it more beautiful to say that human beings are good people, but they require specific environments to allow the goodness that is in them to come out, to grow? Is that a more beautiful truth than the truth that people are basically slime bags? But as long as you have the right amount of shame and punishment and corporal punishment and this and that and the other and an active policing force and enough surveillance cameras, they behave against their nature somewhat decently. But as soon as they can find a way around it, they get you every time. Is that true? Well, see, there's data that supports both. But which is the more beautiful truth? Now, when both work, meaning it's perfectly true, I am in different environments all around the world, and one of my favorite things to notice is how, for example, it started when I was young. My parents would bully and fight and do this and that behind closed doors. So this was them at home, and then you give them the environment of a social context out in there where they're wanting to look good, and it brings out the best in them. Now, it's a matter of a belief. Do you believe that they're basically horrible people who are ashamed of their horror and so they put on good show in public? Or are they basically great people that don't know how to deal with stuff when they're alone, but do know how to perform in public? Well, see, it's a belief. All beliefs are true, pick the ones that work. I would say pick the more beautiful truth because it's fun. It has to work. It has to work, but because it's fun. And both of those truths, for example, see, the one might lead to more surveillance in parents' homes to stop child abuse, knowing that that's the area where people are hiding and doing horrible things because that's human nature. But the other response might be to create more and more civic contexts in which to celebrate beautiful aspects of our humanity, to celebrate and honor the positive aspects of family and to take off the shame, and then measure the data and see how that works. So one leads to more distrust and looking around, where's the commie, you just look, you look like a dirty Jew, all this suspicion. The Nazis believed Jews were inferior. So they created a whole bizarre mindset around that, You look at Hitler's face, one of the ugliest, and yet he's talking about, you can see the slant to the eye and the Jew, and it's hilarious. It's absolutely hilarious. Is it useful? Well, it's useful for keeping Hitler in power, if that's your goal. Is it useful for the world we want to create? Doubtful. And so, is it beautiful? It's more fun that way. Is it consistent? Meaning, useful truths are consistent, meaning this floor is solid. That is a useful truth as long as it is. Meaning, if I'm told this floor is solid and I'm out on a wooden deck that's highly rotten and every few steps I fall through, it's a not useful truth because it's inconsistent with the data. The much more useful truth would be this is a rotten deck. You have to be careful, walk on the joists, you can't touch the boards. It's pretty safe on the joists, not on the boards. That is a more useful truth because it's consistent. Now, this brings me to a very important point because a lot of the arguments around truth are on this level where it's too blunt. So you have this person saying this deck is perfectly safe. And you have this other person saying it's unsafe. Now the truth is, the joists are safe, and about every third board isn't. Joists are the beams that go under a floor, just so you know, and then the boards, are what get attached down onto the joists. Now they're both true, but neither is helpful. And the problem is you don't have enough distinction. So if you say the deck, it's referring to everything inside the deck. But what if only the railing is unsafe? And what if it's only unsafe for someone who weighs more than 100 pounds, meaning it's a rotten railing, but it's got enough strength in it that as long as you don't put more than about 40 pounds on it leaning outward, it will not collapse. And people who weigh less than 100 pounds don't put more than 40 pounds leaning outward. So it is safe for children under 10 years old. See, that's useful because most things in life, you can't make them perfect. Sure, perfect thing is wave your fingers and magically, without anyone spending money they don't have, a deck that is less safe becomes safer. It's wonderful. And then both people will agree that it is safe if it's perfect. But where you get these arguments is the deck is unsafe. No, it is safe. No, it is unsafe. We need to fix the deck now. No, we don't. And what's going on is unsafe, we need to fix. Safe, we don't need to fix. This isn't actually the argument. The reality is, of course, that it is not as safe as it could be, that there is a limited budget, and that person A has an agenda probably to spend that money on somewhere else. Maybe he wants the family vacation, she wants a safer deck for the kids. He's thinking, you don't understand. I have had it. I've been working like a dog. You're not giving me sex because you're focusing on these kids. And now the kids again. I think that I can hold on to this marriage if we have a family vacation together because we get closer, there's more sex, the kids enjoy it. I don't have enough money. I am not going into debt one more bit to redo the deck when that nixes the family vacation. So that's what he's thinking. And he knows the information. He knows that there's nail heads sticking up. And he knows they can be hammered down one more time. And she knows that there are nails sticking up. And she knows that she's not going to get around to it, and he probably won't either. But they're not actually having the conversation at a nuanced enough level for it to be useful truths. They're arguing about, is the deck safe or unsafe? It is safe, meaning you go over to Asia and you watch little 6-year-old boys leaping from rotting boats to this, to that, in bare feet, in perfect health. So that's one reality where, half falling apart shipwrecks are safe. And then you've got this reality of TV and stuff that says every little thing, you've got to put on news. You've got to basically change your whole life every time anyone creates a new product. Because for the love of your children, if you don't do this, they are not safe. Oh, look at person A who didn't buy our product. Look, here they are dying a miserable death. Then there's person B who bought our product. And this, we also have different views around this. One mindset might be, oh, we got to buy that product. The other one is saying, wait a minute. If I tear out this whole deck, what's the reality? The reality is contractors all over the place, leaving nails on the ground. The kids will fall on one of those nails. The deck won't even be covered for a few days. Our kids don't do what we say. They're going to be running across the deck when it's something. What if they fall through? And it's a fact that while doing a major renovation to make things safer, someone may trip over an extension cord and break their neck. Well, then how smart do you feel? You tried to be safe. But the process of changing reality is chaotic, i.e. less safe. Does the 5% increased safety for the few times people go out on the deck offset the fact that the whole environment is 90% less safe during construction for a 1-month period? You could say the whole thing, the family is safer with nothing happening. Or how about sticking some plywood over the whole thing and screwing it down and then going on the family vacation? Well, we can't have that. What would the neighbors think? What would Margaret and think? They have such nice decks over there. So I forget which mid-sentence I got cut off there. But the bottom line is, when you're having someone say is, isn't, what needs to happen for the truth to have consistency is it needs to have enough magnification. For example, you can't say, is the deck safe? Yes, no. You're obviously dealing with a lack of distinction, unless you're dealing with someone who's just pathologically lying. But if you say, instead, I have tripped on rusty nails popping out of the deck and believe that there is a risk of tearing skin and or tetanus from those nails. So we're not talking about the deck, we're talking about the rust on the nails. Well, then you have something like, oh, those nails aren't rusty. Okay, will you look at the nail? Is what do you call these little black dots here? Well, that's not mud rust. Okay, is it enough to get tetanus? Well, I don't think so. Do you know? I can't be bothered looking up all these things. Okay, well, I have looked it up, and that it just takes a few of these specks to get tetanus. And our children haven't received those shots. So I'm concerned. Well, they never play on the deck. Not when you're around, yes, because you're at home at night, but they do play around during the day. Here's a picture of them playing here. Here's a picture of them playing here. These are the neighbors. This also creates a liability. So you come into convergence around actual facts at a level of magnification that brings that brings focus to the things that cannot be argued about. Most of us are not that dumb that will look at a rusty nail and say that isn't a rusty nail. Now, if we're the one having to do something about it, having to pay for it, having to redo the deck, we may be thinking, give me a break. I step on rusty nails every day on the job site, this, that, and the other. I grew up, it's like, let's put things in perspective. And perspective is a very important part of truth, because to get, is something true, does not mean it's useful, remember. Doesn't mean it's what should be prioritized. That's where perspective, does it create balance or imbalance? Is it in perspective? Now here's what I mean by perspective. Going back to that family. The implications of a divorce on the emotional well-being of a family is profound and certain. And certain exactly what the implications are in a probability field. But it is certain. Every statistic backs that up. So, for example, if a union is splintering apart, getting further and further apart, due to, among other things, money strains. Every time he or she brings up money that isn't there and wants to spend money, the marriage weakens. Then the question of, so then we have to look at statistics. Honestly, look at statistics. So, how many rusty decks in the area? It seems like about 30% of the area have rusty this, that, and the other, and da-da-da. This is so 1/3 of all the people around here. How many kids do we know in the last 10, 15 years that have gone to hospital, had any major repercussions around rusty nails? So yes, it is a good idea. As I might add, it is a good idea if we buy all organic food. It is a good idea if we send our child to private school. It is a good idea if we rebuild the whole house so that we can have a soundproof bedroom and we don't stop having sex every time because you don't want this kid to hear you and he's right there. It would be better if we had a soundproof house. It would be better if I had a nicer boss. It would be better. The key is, what's going to make the difference? Well, in what context? What's going to take the least amount of effort to make the biggest difference for all of us? Because we are a family. And avoiding divorce is a significant thing. Now, if you're hearing, hey, a minute, I cannot stand this out of context. Like, this all is being talked about in the context of this bank account. That's the context. We're not talking about this in terms of the GDP of the United States. We're not talking about this in reference to your neighbor's bank account or your best friend's or anyone else's bank. We are talking about what is the best way to spend our money overall. Is it in perspective? And that's the key thing. It is the most difficult thing also, because what happens, and this is where advertisers prey on us, is we do not have perspective. The natural state of the brain is myopic. I'm a landscape designer, and I'd say a third of the time, a client calls me out after they have designed their own landscape for the last 5, 10, 20, 25 years. They've done it themselves. And there is almost always, meaning like 98, 99% of the time, there is a glaring problem. And the problem is perspective. It goes back to the hodgepodge polka dot look. They did not see the entire sweep of the garden. That's my job. They saw this little pocket here. They saw this cute little plant at Safeway. They saw this thing on sale in Home Depot. They saw this at Macy's. They saw this here. Their friend gave them this, and of course, since it was a gift, it had to be planted in the garden. And they have an absolute hodgepodge that made sense day by day by day in the myopia of the moment, but does not make sense in the sweep of a life. That's perspective. So-and-so watches ads on TV, so-and-so's out working. Oh my God, we have a nail popping up in our deck. She watches the whole family's life falling apart on TV, because of course that's good advertising. And she, oh my God, you'll never believe what I saw today. A whole family was ruined because of a rusty nail. We have got to do something about that deck. No, we don't. That happens once in 100,000 times. That was exaggerated. There's a treatment for that if it does happen in our life in 100,000 times. And what we really need to do, because it's what we argue about and what's tearing this marriage apart, is pay down our debt. Period. We need to pay down our debt. That's perspective. We need to build our skills, raise our income. That's perspective. I'll tell you what. You bring in an extra 3 or 4K a month, and we'll redo the deck. How about it? You know, we grow the account. Now, we can, so there's a process, there's a sequence, there's perspective, there's statistical impact. We have an obsessive and emotionally illiterate culture. Studies show that Americans who are offered bonus money, like overtime, will trade an hour of sleep for more overtime. The same studies show that their happiness goes down. The same studies show they think their happiness will go up. Why? Because we're in a culture, burn the candle at both ends. That's cool, right? Passion and all this stuff. And we have a culture that obsesses with 10,000 advertisements every year on what? If you can buy this, you notice the Porsche car driver never has any traffic in the ads? Do you think Porsches would sell if they showed reality? Of course not. It's the idea, the freedom of the road. You want to be king of the road? It's like, you're not king of the road. You're going 2 miles per hour in a Honda Civic, because 1982, you go 2 miles per hour in a wheelbarrow, and you get more exercise. Why don't you just get out your wheelbarrow and cart your partner to work, save on gas, pay down debt, and you'll be going exactly as fast as that 911 special edition Porsche driver who's sitting in the same traffic you're sitting in. They don't show reality. It's the idea, the illusion. It's selling the illusion. I'd love a Porsche on any of the roads that could provide, if buying a Porsche would buy me the roads that Porsche does its ads on, I'd buy a Porsche. Not for the fucking car, but for the roads. They don't have traffic. They look nice. My roads don't. Potholes, bang, this and that and the other. It's like, use a wheelbarrow. So you want to bring something into perspective, and you want to zoom in enough to have adequate distinction. So the reason you ask, is a truth consistent? Is capitalism good? Is communism good? You will find there's good data to support positive elements. For example, Denmark, if you ever have the privilege to go to Denmark, if you interview 100 Danish people, you will find an astronomically high statistic of satisfaction with things that are completely, that Americans are completely unsatisfied for. And it is a socialist democracy, not a socialist dictatorship, not a capitalist democracy, a socialist democracy. And it works beautifully. There are more billionaires per capita. The roads are cleaner. The architecture is nicer. There are free bicycles. Everyone has a college degree at a great college. Everyone has free health care. The quality of life for the average person in Copenhagen is 3 times higher than the quality of life for the average American anywhere. I live in one of the richest counties, and I envy the Danes in Copenhagen. But what about freedom? I was expecting, having heard all the gibberish in my country, I was expecting to find salivating, bitter people who were outraged that the government took 80% of their money. Well, I did the math after I came back. My government takes a good 50% of my money. The Danish government takes 80%. So for an extra 30% of my money, I could get a lifestyle 300% better. It is astounding what they've done in Denmark. So it's not surprising that they're one of the happiest countries in the world. It's astounding what they've done in Denmark. So then clearly, you can't say relative to an infinite, objective thing that socialism is worse than capitalism. You have to say this kind of socialism in this kind of context is worse than this kind of capitalism in this kind of context, and this kind of capitalism in this context is better than this type of socialism in this context. You've got to zoom in And then you've got to look relative to what? Like, I was measuring what's important to me. The architecture that I saw in Denmark was 3 times nicer than the architecture I see in one of the richest counties in America, Marin County, where I live. 3 times nicer. The level of background anxiety, the manic, hyperactive, fear-based anxiety that is present in America wasn't there. They lack that background of manic fear and suspicion. It's just not there. That's huge for me. They are satisfied with their jobs. They are in close relationships. They feel safe. They like their government. They like their country. They are more competent in health, housing, career, even billionaires per capita. They are more competent as a country than America is today. So all I want to know is, how do they do it? This is where truth differentiates from dogma. Would I rather live in the United States or Russia? No question. Would I rather live in the United States or Denmark? No question. Would I rather live in Denmark or in Thailand? Question. I'm in Thailand right now. But when I come as a tourist, see, this is where the distinction comes in. So if I came as a tourist to Copenhagen right now, I'm in frozen, dark night weather, can't swim in the ocean, all that, and prices are high. Coming to Thailand as a tourist, I'm in warm tropical climate with people who smile a lot more than Copenhagen. It's a more feminine culture. Prices are lower. There's more freedom. Would I rather be born in Thailand or Copenhagen? Copenhagen. Would I rather travel more as a third party? And then of course I don't get any of the benefits. So I go as a tourist to Denmark, I don't get a free college education. In fact, the Danish government pays Danish college students a monthly stipend for going to college. And the only gripe, I met 2 lovely Danes, Danish college students in Thailand. I wasn't, I just like to keep up because I've never seen competency like that on a well-being level in any government as I have in Copenhagen. So, how you doing? Happy? Great. How's Denmark? Great. Anything to complain about? Well, there's just one thing. What is it? Well, it's not a big thing, but the government, in a fiscal measure of austerity, has reduced the stipend it pays to every college student for going to college for free at a great college that month. This is not a big deal, but we can't buy as many video games. We can live with it. And I said, do you realize that if you were in America, you not only don't get a stipend, by the time you get out of a good college, you're $200,000 in debt. They said, wow, how dumb. Yeah. So is it distinct? Do you have enough distinctions so that you can see the particular area where you're right and you're right? You're right because the statistics do say that it's, one in every 100,000 children that actually has anything serious happen because of a rusty deck nail. And you're right because, yes, rusty deck nails are present on our property and they might hurt our child. But if we put things in perspective, we're both right that paying down the debt is more important for our marriage, and that a marriage is more important for the well-being of our child than anything to do with the deck. In fact, if it came to it, and you were really that concerned, it would be better for the well-being of the child for me to go out the chainsaw, hack the damn deck down into smithereens, so there are no rusty nails, haul it to the dump, and pay down the debt, and bring our marriage together. How about that? You know, so this is perspective. Is it in perspective? There's also a balance. Does it bring balance or imbalance? Now, here's what I mean here. Dog owner. You meet a dog owner walking out. Yappy dog, aggressive, tries to bite your baby, blah, 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 blah. And the dog owner says, "You have no idea." So the dog owner turns it on them, right? This yappy dog almost bit your baby, vicious thing, doesn't do anything she's told, and of course you address the dog owner. The dog owner is responsible for the dog. You say, "Get your dog under control." The dog owner says, "You wouldn't believe. Look, here's where she bit me. This is this. This is a vicious, out of control dog. I am doing my best here." So this is all true. It's a vicious, out of control dog. The dog owner is doing their best. But does that truth bring balance or imbalance? Meaning you're at cortisol level from having your baby almost attacked is not resolved by turning the attention onto the dog owner. And what's the big picture? The big picture, which you just have to watch some dog whisperer videos on YouTube to understand, the big picture is that dogs reflect the competence or incompetence of their owners and their owners' paradigms. That's the big picture. So, does it bring balance or imbalance? I'd say that truth brings imbalance. It says, your baby doesn't really matter. Look at the bite on me, the owner's hand. You're worried about it. Well, look at me. I have no idea, what to do half the time. I mean, I'm afraid for my own life. This vicious dog is alone in my house with me, and I just don't feel safe. So that dog that this owner is responsible for has shifted all the attention away from your baby, when you're not responsible for that dog, to them. So it's decreased. So the owner, by having an untrained dog, hurts you and then pulls on your attention to comfort them, not you. He's not saying, "I'm going to get her trained, this and that and the other." So it's a truth. It's true. There's a vicious dog. She is bit, blah, blah, blah. But it's not a truth that brings balance. The truth that brings balance is the truth that says, I'm really sorry. I'm an incompetent trainer, and I'm going to motivate myself to do some dog training. If I can't do that, I'm going to put this dog down or give it up for adoption with someone who knows what they're doing. That's a truth that leads to balance. That's responding to the fact that your baby almost got bit by a violent dog. This is responsibility, and it brings balance. It's also more balanced to say, gee, I must not be a good trainer, since we all know dogs reflect their owner. That's a balancing thing, because you cannot blame a dog. See, this is the bigger context. If the dog whisperer can take some of the most violent dogs around the country and in a matter of 10, 20 minutes have healthy, safe dogs, this is not the problem of the dog. This is the reward system. And then most of these aggressive dogs have been severely abused by their owners and or the people they got them from. Not because it's the nature, even pit bulls. It is not the nature of almost any dogs to be vicious come birth. Yes, there are genetic defects in the odd one. They need to be put down. And it's not the dog's responsibility to put them down. So, does it bring imbalance? Where is the focus? And what's the bigger context? The bigger context is that it has nothing to do with the dog. And so to blame, your dog bit me, and then shift the focus to the dog, it's all true. But it's not a truth that brings balance. It's truth that distracts from the bigger truth, which is, why do you have a dog if you refuse to learn how to train it or have it professionally trained? And why are you risking my baby when you know that your dog has been hurting people for X amount of time, starting with you? What is it that makes you willing to put up with this amount of abuse? And then you can go back one larger context, the people who need and hang on to abuse like that, of which there is a demographic in this culture, are people with various attachment and stuff in a culture that refuses to protect the relationships of employees and companies and discards people, of children in abusive parenting situations. And we can say this is not the responsibility of those children and the people that grow up so attached to an aggressive dog that they can't, it's the one stable relationship in their life, and they have a completely independent relationship with the dog. That the dog is not supposed to be a husband or a wife. The dog is supposed to learn discipline that makes the dog feel safe and happy, because there's clear boundaries. So the bigger truth would be, we're in a culture that traumatizes individuals and doesn't teach healthy parenting to anyone, which then leads to a certain segment of the population who have dogs who don't know how to parent their dogs, and then leads us to blame other people, because that's what we like to do in our culture. So that's the bigger context. That brings balance. And then the question is, what are we going to do with that on a cultural level? If you go away from that incident and write to your politician or give money to a charity that helps teach dog training skills to people who don't have them, or if you give the woman a voucher, if she doesn't have any money, to take her dog to a trainer, that's responsibility, the ability and willingness to respond so that someone else's baby is not attacked because we're dealing with an incompetent owner who doesn't have the wherewithal within their mindset, resources, etc., to become a competent owner, and who's depending on their dog emotionally, however abusively, just like many dysfunctional marriages. That's context. Now we can do something, as opposed to let's all leave babies vulnerable to vicious dogs and blame the dog, which is a useless truth. It's a useless truth. So does it bring balance or imbalance? And then the other thing is that there needs to be a balance between a competent outcome and a value-based journey. And this is very relevant in the China democracy debates right now. I forget his name, Jacques something, Jaquus. Do a search on China. He points out that China's government, with what it's doing in the last 20 years and what it's planning on doing over the next 50 years, is significantly more competent than what the United States is doing and able to do. But the focus of people in the West is all on the value-based journey. The value in the West is freedom. That's the number one value. The value in China is competency. Well, it's one of them anyway. So there's a tension between what is clearly to bring 1 billion people together over an entire continent and facilitate an orchestration that has never occurred in human history through an industrial revolution process in the modern age is an astounding achievement in competency. But it is not being done in a way that mirrors the freedom-based value in the United States, though there are some fun tensions in this, which we see around the McCarthy area, Clinton's emails, Trump's misogyny. Basically the policy is that it's fine that we terrorize WikiLeaks. It's fine that we make Edward Snowden enemy number one for telling us what's actually going on. It's fine that, we have a misogynist president. It's fine that we have a lying other possible candidate for president. It's fine that there is complete incompetency in our government, as long as we have freedom. Freedom for what? Freedom to publish whatever thing we want to publish. Freedom to protest. That's the bottom line. So this is a value-based journey. So I'm fine putting up with childhood abuse. I'm fine putting up with half the people don't have health care system. I'm fine with the homeless people in my town, as long as there is freedom of the press. And as long as we are all free to talk about what we don't like in this country, whatever happens is fine. Now, this is where, so in China you have competency. In Denmark you have exceptional competency and you have freedom in the press, but you don't have as much freedom with your money. Well, that's communism, right? And so there, if someone's homeless, they actually pay government people to go out and offer them a free apartment and coax them into a free apartment. Come on. And there's a few people that absolutely refuse. They want to live under a bridge. But you don't meet them on the streets like they do in the richest county in America, where I see people under bridges and this and that every single day, and they are shamed. Now, they are shamed, but it's all free, right? It's all in the name of freedom. So they're free to be fired from their jobs, and they're free to not be given government support, and they're free to complain about it. They can shake their fist under that, violently protest, all that was done to them. As long as they're free to do that, who gives a shit that they're under a bridge, right? And then on the other side, you have no. We don't care about, is it free, is it not? We don't care, is it a democracy or not? What we care about is the economy growing? Is our healthcare system good? Cuba had a better healthcare system, for example, for a while until the blockade and different things like this. So there is a tension between the value-based journey and the outcome. And this tension exists in every relationship as well. When I know a given area and I tell my girlfriend, be quiet, we're doing this, and I'll explain later. And then I do it. And our life gets saved, or we save $200, or we beat the traffic, or whatever it is. This is placing competency over value-based journey. The value-based journey is we debate it equally. We take as much time until both people are in accord. We come together in complete balance and harmony. And if all the shops have closed by that time and the debate is mute, it doesn't matter that we didn't get anything done today, because what matters is how we got there. And then you have on the other situation, it doesn't matter how we got there. What matters is, did we get it done? This is the competency value-based tension. And there are truths. It's true that freedom is important. It's true that harmony is important. But it is also true that competency is important. Meaning that if your ancestors were not competent enough to survive, but were harmonious, they don't exist, and you wouldn't be here. So there's a certain logic that says a certain amount of competency is necessary. And then in the best healthy environments, there's no tension. You have values that are competent values, and these are values that are not out of whack. So for example, the value of freedom of the press and freedom to say whatever you want is elevated to an extraordinarily high skyscraper in the United States. What about the value of being able to have a nurturing hug in the United States? Is that even mentioned? What about the value of getting traumatic education as an infant? What about and so you can say things like, well, none of this matters, basically. It's fine that you don't have a place to get a hug. It's fine that you cannot have a meaningful, non-judgmental conversation with anyone in the entire country. It's fine. Now, we're going to also value choice in consumerism. So we're going to have two skyscrapers: freedom to say whatever you want and freedom to buy anything you want, anywhere, anytime, anyhow, in any way. Credit card, this and that. We will get that fucking item to you overnight. But, so we'll have two pyramids. You can buy anything anywhere. You can talk about anything you want. But you don't have the freedom of an emotional education. That freedom is almost non-existent. You don't have freedom to have a hug anytime you need your cortisol levels to go down to become more empathic. You don't have the freedom to talk for 2 or 3 hours about something that means something to you anytime that you want, because we're all too busy buying and selling things, right? And you don't have the freedom to protect your neighbor's child from abuse, because the social services systems is almost as sociopathic as those parents. So it's kind of a hard call to know whether the child is actually going to be better ripped away sociopathically from their home or left in a clearly abusive situation. And you don't have the right when your neighbor gives you the finger and rages at you when you meet them at the weird intersection in your one-way road. You don't have the ability to protect yourself from that kind of abuse, as long as they don't physically beat you, but you do have the ability to buy cigarettes and alcohol to numb the pain. So you've got 3 skyscrapers, and these are the pinnacles, and then these other freedoms, they're just not that important in America, are they? What about safe, empathic healthcare? Yeah, I guess we talk about it a little bit, so let's give it a little bit of credibility. But I can get a hug less reliably than I can get 27 brands of shampoo shipped free the next day with the best price on earth. The question is, in context, do we need cheaper shampoo more than we need a hug? The question is, do we need a backup battery charger to be rushed overnight just in case there's bad weather more than we need to be able to talk deeply with someone capable of listening and responding? Do we need 287 channels of TV? Let's go back to the choice of consumerism again. More than we need someone who can grieve the loss of a child with us with kindness and empathy and not rush us because they got to get back to their TV program. What do we need? What will create the most well-being? See, and I'd be willing to trade a lot of this stuff if I had to for more of this. If I have to take freedom of the press and say, okay, fine, you want freedom of the press, but let's say you're only free 5 days of the week, but 1 day of the week we can get good nurturing hugs anywhere, anytime, anyhow. Seem like good direction. Let's say I can't get 27 brands of shampoo anytime, anywhere. Let's say I can only get 20. But instead, we get 20 hours of emotional literacy in high school. Let's say we are not free to be rude to people anytime, anywhere, but we are free to have long conversations once a week. You see, there's a tension between, if you elevate certain values to an extreme, it's the same tension as the family with the, it's a limited amount of bank account, a limited amount of hours in school. You have to decide, trigonometry or emotional literacy, algebra or emotional literacy, Shakespeare or emotional literacy, kicking a football or emotional literacy. There's a tension. You've got X amount of money, X amount of hours, and it's what comes out on top. And I would suggest that the best thing is kind of in the mid-ground, as with so many things. It's not that freedom is good or bad. It's when one person, like it was New Year's Eve, I'd been on this beach 8 times. This is my girlfriend's first New Year's Eve on the beach. And she wants to let off a good luck, balloon. So I'm guiding her to where they are because I've been there 8 times. And she says, I think they're over here. She has absolutely no basis for thinking that because she's never been on this beach. They're not in sight. She just thinks. And I say, well, if you actually want to let off a balloon, I suggest we continue to where I know they are, since you've never been on this beach. This is competency over value-based decisions. I'm not slowing my walk or whatever to include that, but I am being competent for her. She's the one that wants to let off this balloon. And I bring her that. And I'm aware of the sacrifice in, balance of power kind of dynamic. And it's not ideal, meaning in the ideal sense, she would know as much as I did in that situation, and we'd do it her way as much as mine, and they would converge because it's true, that's the place to buy the balloons. But the problem comes in crises of time. In this case, it's New Year's Eve. There's a limited window of time before it's kind of not really of the moment. And so, competency, when there's urgency, trumps kind of discourse. But there's also a cost. The cost is to the relationship. So you have to kind of think, there's a cost to the relationship when you fail. You want to buy a house, you start arguing about it, and someone else buys the house while you're arguing. There is a cost to the relationship. We failed to buy that house. There's a slump. There's also a cost when someone says, I'm going to do it, I'm going to get it done, out of my way, gets it done, you buy the house, and you didn't include me. There's a cost for that. And the question is sometimes, which is the bigger cost? Well, I feel very fortunate in my relationship. There's a shared sense that when in those areas that I can be more competent, that my leadership is valued more than the, let's debate it for half an hour or whatever, and so that, but this is a very real debate. Meaning for someone else, the debate would be more important than the balloon. Okay, fine. As long as that's clear, then it's fine. In the US, one of the biggest economies on earth, there is almost nothing major happening on a government level of any note. There is an incredible amount of incompetence. In China, in Bhutan, in Denmark, in other countries, major national undertakings for the well-being of their people are underway with a very high level of competency. And what's blocking it in the United States is political, short-term interest. Well, that's the whole thing the United States is trying to export. We're better than you because we believe in democracy. Why? Because democracy leads to a better country for its people. That's why. We don't believe in democracy because that's how you ruin a country. You should do it the way we do it because our way is better, because we have a better economy than other people, we have happier people, blah, 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 blah. And the trouble is, it's not working at this moment in time. It may have worked at one point, it's not working now. So maybe the question shouldn't be as much, is this really blah, 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 as much as what does it take to help the most people in this area of their well-being? Could we all agree that based on an objective standard, that's what will be done, whether or not everyone votes for it? Whether or not we took 4 years to debate it, that we just do it? Or are we fine with the fact that the Chinese, for example, are significantly more competent than we are in these areas, in big, they're building a 700-mile canal to populate a whole region of their country. And they're getting it done despite the fact that it irritates this person, and the people also have a culture that defers to the state, where the family and the country and the culture is more important than the individual. This is again in tension with the United States, in which the individual's free individual right is supposed to be worth more than the entire country. That the only way that this, if this one individual can just, throw a monkey wrench in the whole mechanism of some big development that would benefit a lot of people, and it doesn't care, because the rights of the individual are what it's all about. Is that healthy in the extreme? Well, we're saying it isn't with surveillance. We're all getting mass surveillance. So the issue comes back. I give these examples because they're somewhat relevant, more than the examples in my own life. But the truth is, these truths are not as relevant to me personally than the decision of whether to shut down my business, which makes a lot of money in the United States, and move to Thailand where I'm happier, or to do both, or what. That's a decision that affects my life. Is it more effective than any other truth? This is kind of the angle of the lens, because if you point, for example, the lens this way at this pattern, you may not see the pattern right behind it because it's obscured by this. But if you point the angle this way, you will see the curve. You may not see this curve. So the angle of the lens, is it being looked at from this angle or this angle, determines what things can be seen or in focus. And so in that sense, is it more effective than any other truth? So all people are slobs if you let them. That's a truth. People love to be clean and presentable when it makes them look good. That's also a truth. You're an uncaring person. You're a caring person. They're both true. What helps you see the pattern you're trying to change and influence at that time, really? So if you're trying to increase people's nourishment, and you realize that vitamin D, which happens to be deficient in a large number of populations, vitamin D. So what is the lens of truth that will be most helpful at dealing with the vitamin D deficiency? Well, there's a couple of angles. One is market economy efficiency. Where can you buy the most vitamin D3 anywhere on Earth? Where can you buy it in large shipments? Two, how can you get it anywhere around the world? Transportation. For example, Walmart is one of the most effective or most cost-effective and efficient transporters of goods anywhere on Earth. So you might hire Walmart to get vitamin D anywhere you wanted it around the world. It's also one of the best price negotiators. So you might contract with Walmart to say, get us vitamin D anywhere in the world for way less money than a nonprofit or a government can do it, because that's what they're good at. So this is market lens, efficiency. Go to the people who do it best, contract with them, and if you're some do-gooder that hates Walmart, give it up in this area. Because if they can get your vitamin D where you need it to go cheaper than anywhere else, you have a limited bank account just like this couple, and Walmart will make it go further. That's when enemies become friends. When you understand that a strength is neutral, when that strength is used against something that you care about, it's your enemy. When it's used for something you care about, it's your friend. Only an idiot takes all the bullets of one force and then says they're so vile, I'm not going to have any of those bullets help me go where I want to go just on principle. I'd rather die, a miserable death in incompetence than work with one of my sworn enemies who could happen to achieve my goal for me in a few seconds with their resources. I'm just so scornful that everything is evil about them that I won't even engage with them. Well, that's kind of ineffective, isn't it? Again, competence versus value-based. On principle, I will not do this. On principle, the United States would not learn from the Cubans how to have a better health system. On principle. No, okay, fine. We have a crappy health system. They have a good one. Great. So you want to look at the angle of lens that will reveal the pattern most lucidly that you're trying to address. So Walmart for purchasing and transporting. Then what you need to have is a lens that measures vitamin D deficiency. And it needs to be an efficient lens. Well, what about doing random samplings of 1,000 in countries and or groups all around the world, and do 1,000 rich people and 1,000 not, and find the place in the world that has the least amount of vitamin D3 anywhere on the planet, and spending the first money getting Walmart to obtain it and ship it to those groups. And then you have to figure out what's the way in that culture to get it out there. Does it have to be freely given? Is everything free in that culture devalued and unimportant? Does it have to be in a nice drink that has strawberry taste because everyone there likes strawberry drinks? You have to package it in a way that is effective. And you want to measure the end of this equation, because what we're looking at is truths that work. At the end of this equation, you want to see $1 equals 3,000 hits of vitamin D3 in method 1. $1 equals 100 shots of vitamin D3 in method number 2. And $1 equals 0 things of vitamin D3, or 0.5 in method number 3. Now, to the degree that you lean towards the competency area of the equation, you're going to go with area number 1. Now, let's say this is Walmart, your sworn enemy, purchasing low-cost, cheap labor, factory-made vitamin D3 and shipping it around in full shipping containers, rapidly, and disseminating it. Vitamin number you lose 30 times the effectiveness by the time you go with a certified green. Everyone has had their certified stamp. There have been no child labor used in this. There's nothing this. There's no this. The shipping containers are painted green so that they're more ecological. And you've lost 30 times your potency. And in 0.5, you give it to a government who spent most of the dollar debating things, and then sends an aircraft carrier that the country has to pay $1 million for one flight with the incompetence of the military. And then you get 0.5 per dollar, but it is all above board and politically correct. So what do you care about? Political correctness or getting the 3,000 vitamin Ds to people? Because this is the essence of truth. There are tensions. Which truth among the many truths is going to take you where you want to go relative to your goals now? That's the only truth that matters for you. I'm going to suggest that truth is not abstract and out of context, but it is personal and in context, relative to your values, your goals, and what matters to you, what you care about, and the truths that help you get there come at a cost to other truths that could have taken you towards other values and other goals. But if you're at peace with that, if you're comfortable that this is the larger context that matters, the truth that takes you where you want to go most efficiently, is the truth to hang on to. And the truth, however dogmatic, however historical, however commonly held by X and X groups, that leads you into a landmine, that leads you into a pit of failure and incompetence, is not the truth that you want to hang on to and partner with. I'd love to hear if you take any of this and use it to change your life for the better, how you did it, what truth you used. And it doesn't matter what anyone else says. If your life improves in an area that matters to you, if you help someone else you care about improve in a way that matters to you and to them, that's a truth worth holding for as long as it'll take you where you're going. And I want to remind you about the relative journey of human life. The relative journey of human life is as simple as a stepping stone path. You are going from the left to the right. This is life. This is evolution. You started out 1 year old. The next step is 2 years old. The next step is 3 years old. If you are 3 years old, your next step is 4. If you are 2 years old, your next step is 3. If you are 5 years old, you're going backwards. If you go back to 4 years old, it's a relative journey. The next step for you depends on where you are. It depends on where a country is. It depends on where an individual it is. For a cocaine addict that's snorting 2 units of cocaine high, I'm not very up on that, that goes down to 1 unit, that's progress. For the person who's smoking or snorting half a unit, it's going backwards. It's relative. Where you are now determines the field of view that is ahead of you, that is growth and progress, and the field that is behind you, or bad, or devolution, or evil. Good, evil is dependent on where you are and what's important to you. If you have $1 and are making $1 an hour, making $2 an hour is a major accomplishment. If you're making $5 an hour, making $2 an hour, relative to the goal of making the most money possible, is a tragedy. It's not the point. It's your relationship to it. And there will come a time, if you are majorly successful in anything, then when your wildest dreams today are your most bitter disappointments tomorrow. And that's growth. It's all relative. It's not about this is always good or always bad. It's for a totally clean, sustainable, energy-producing country like Bhutan, to have a more efficient coal plant is bad. For a major continent transforming country like China to go from inefficient coal to efficient coal is a big step forward. It's relative to the position. Truth is also relative to the position. It may start out, we need to learn how to tell the truth. Then we have to learn how to tell the truth with some degree of courtesy, with some degree of timing. It's an endless journey. There's always a step forward. There's always a step behind. It's the direction, ultimately, that counts. And the truths that take us toward a positive future are the truths that are most useful for us today.